Yes, as I was saying, I'm coordinator of the Cambridgeshire Campaign for Better Transport. That works with, but it's independent of the national group, the Campaign for Better Transport. And I'm not an expert on the issues we're leading on tonight, so I'm relying on Andrew Irwin's notes. The Campaign for Better Transport is a charity that promotes sustainable transport. It's been around for over 40 years. It wants rail to be a realistic option for more journeys and more people, and it has a Fair Fares Now campaign calling for simpler, fairer and more affordable tickets. We asked why are our railways so expensive? One, it was starved of investment for many years, pre and immediately post-privatisation, resulting in a large backlog of maintenance and repair. It's still ostensibly a Victorian network in many places, leading to expensive maintenance. And passenger demand, the increasing passenger demand creates costs through wear and tear and demand for new services. How much do passengers contribute to the running costs? Revenue for fares has increased from 54% of overall funding in 2009 to 66% now and 69% by 2018. By 2018, fares revenue will cover 103% of the operating costs, up from 80% in 2009, and the government share of funding will have fallen to 20%, down from 38% in 2009. Why are passengers' contributions rising so fast? First of all, passenger numbers have doubled in the last decade and they're continuing to grow. For example, in the third quarter of 2014, it's 4.3% up on the previous year. The government is forcing fares up. It's currently sort of as a default using the retail price index plus 1% formula. It toyed with 3% before being forced back down. In the last 2 years, it has foregone this 1%, but that's not a change in government policy. It's just a sort of one-off. And so this year, fares have risen between 2.2 and 2.5%. For regulated fares then, fares are up 20% since 2010 and are rising 3 times faster than wages. So what should be done? Measures need to stop rail becoming unaffordable, which can be achieved without expensive and time-consuming industry reform. It suggests moving from retail price index plus 1% to consumer price index rather than and getting rid of that 1%. The consumer price index is considered a more reliable measure of inflation, and it tends to be less. Also, introduce flexible ticketing. The government is dragging its heel on introducing tickets for part-time employees, those who work flexible hours, some of whom have no choice but to buy full-time season tickets, and move faster on devolution. City regions should be given more control over rail services and ticketing. The alternative models like Transport for London and Merseyrail are able to target investment in line with other social and economic objectives rather than just paying for the railway, and they routinely get the highest passenger satisfaction levels.
As passenger focus, we represent passengers. So anything that I put forward tonight is on behalf of passengers and evidence from passengers. So as Simon said, passengers now pay about 66% of what is needed in the rail industry. And for that reason, we feel very strongly that as passengers, as we're paying most for the railways, then as passengers we should have a stronger voice. Passenger Focus carries out research. Our main piece of research is the National Rail Passenger Survey, where we get about 100,000 people respond to that every year. Satisfaction is at around 80% in general, but only 45% of passengers say that they're satisfied with the value for money of fares. Now, value for money, of course, is not just about cost. Value for money is around getting punctual, reliable services and getting a seat. We also fairly recently carried out a passenger priorities for improvement, And not surprisingly, the main priority for improvement is reliability and punctuality. Charles mentioned that, of course, there has been some horrid performance recently, and that's really just not good enough and does need to get better. The second reason that people say they want improvement is getting a seat. And I think those of us who live in and around Cambridge, I frequently stand from King's Cross to Cambridge, and then I often get a seat to really where I live. So what can be done about that one thing around capacity? So you can increase supply, expand, get more rolling stock, more trains on the railway, but actually that's not really a practical solution because actually there's just congestion in that area. Second thing is that you squeeze demand. So higher fares, particularly in peak, but of course nobody particularly wants to see that. The other thing, of course, is that as a society, we start thinking a little bit differently about how we travel. Do we always have to travel at the peak? People, particularly commuters, are very constrained by the fact that employers insist that they're there at a certain time. But it's not only employment that has those constraints on commuters, it's schools having to get children in their time. So there's all this debate about what can be done, and one of the main things there is, and the arguments is that people who don't use the railways, why should they subsidise those of us who do? And there is a good reason for that, and this is something that has already been mentioned, is that there is an economic benefit to the railways. It keeps congestion off the roads. But it's not only that. Commuters have to get to work, and therefore lots of people make decisions about the jobs they have and where they lived based on being able to get there by means of public transport, and therefore they do need some protection. So from our point of view, we feel that as passengers, we should have a larger say. So when it comes to franchising, refranchising, then we should have a say about who gets it and how it's run, and holding them to account if actually the performance is not where it should be. What do we want to see in the future? Simon already mentioned about the flexibility of ticketing. So those of us who maybe work from home 2 days a week, having a season ticket is not always the best value for money. Why aren't there more Carnet fares, flexibility? You have the Oyster in London, where if I have an Oyster card, but actually I'm not travelling tomorrow, I can give it to my husband. If I have a season ticket that I'm paying £4,500 for from Cambridge into London, on the days that I'm not going, why can't I give that to somebody else to use? And if I am paying £4,500 a year, I want to get there on time, and I want to be able to get a seat. I was in the West Midlands fairly recently at a forum, much smaller than this, with only 10 people, and the Department for Transport was asking them for ideas about travel and all of that, and they all said, I want to get to work on time, that's what I'm paying my fare for. And one of the officials from the department, we were in a different room, said, oh, we're not hearing anything new. And I said, well, actually, somebody's not listening then, are they? That is what we are paying our fares for, is a punctual, reliable service. So, big thing here is that if we're paying more and more fares, then we should be getting an excellent service. But maybe we need to rethink about the real need to have to go at peak times, and that's what's driving the fares up. Just wanted to pick up on one other thing, and I think on fares, is that there's too much confusion around fares. So you can get a very good advance ticket, you get very, very good value, but there's so many different ways of doing it. I was in Manchester, in our Manchester office this week, and one of my colleagues was going from Manchester to Bierstead in Kent. And the fare was something like £28 if he did it in advance, which really is very good value. But then we looked, and he was going from Manchester to Euston and then to Bierstead. But it was £35 to go to Euston. So it was dearer to go to Euston than it was for a longer travel to someplace else. So of course, we told all our colleagues in future, just go to Bierstead, don't go to London. But actually just don't go there. So that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. And there's far too much of that in the rail industry, far too much confusion. And a big thing for me is that as passengers, we should have a strong voice.